Today, welcome to Convocation. We know that last year was completely virtual, but this year most of our speakers have been face-to-face. But if you've been tracking with us, we'll start our beginnings of bouncing from Zoom to some weeks face-to-face, other weeks to Zoom. So keep looking for your emails on Tuesday mornings for our different speakers. But I'm really, really excited today because the organization that Sabrina's with, Witness to Innocence, has really blessed our campus many times. We've had multiple speakers been on campus sharing their stories, helping us to think more critically and deeply about some ideas about justice and punishment and the criminal justice system. But today, this is the first time I get to meet Sabrina, but she comes really highly recommended. And Sabrina Butler-Smith, let me tell you a little bit about her. She is was a Mississippi teenager, became a victim of wrongful conviction due to false or misleading forensic evidence and prosecutorial misconduct. She endured 6.5 years in prison, 2 years and 9 months of which were on death row. She has since been exonerated of all the wrongdoings. She is one of only 2 women in the United States exonerated from death row. So let's move forward and think about the here and now. Sabrina lives in Memphis, blessed with 3 kids, aging range from 35 to 18, has previously served on the board of Witness to Innocence. She speaks often to the public and the media about her heartbreaking and moving story, also works with state governments to hopefully change some legislation regarding the death penalty, including a tour of Washington State where she told her story, calling for an abolition 12 months before Washington State Supreme Court declared the death penalty unconstitutional. She also testified on the floor of the New Hampshire legislature 3 years before New Hampshire became the 21st state to repeal capital punishment. Her media interviews include things like CNN, Fox News, National Geographic, today the University of Pikeville, but I think there's other places you might have heard before that. And also, as Sabrina talks today, we think about the 32 people on death row here in the state of Kentucky. So, Sabrina, we are so glad for your message, for your life, and really appreciate your time. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having me, Mr. Rod, and I appreciate those who have tuned in. And I know you could have been doing something else, but I'm gracious that you decided to listen to me today. My name is Sabrina Butler-Smith, and I used to live in a little small town called Columbus, Mississippi. At the time, I was only 17 years old when this happened to me. I had 2 children at the time, my oldest, which is now 35, and my youngest son was 9 months old. I lived in an apartment complex where no one knew me, and I've been on my own since I was like 14 years old. So I basically was trying to be an adult and was still basically a kid myself. So back then I used to like to jog a lot, and I put my son to sleep that night, and I kind of timed him because I kind of knew when he would wake up from his naps or get up wanting something to drink. So I went jogging. The mistake I made was I put him in the bed and I left him at the house by himself. I wasn't gone 10 minutes. Where I lived, my apartments was in a dead end. So I jogged to the beginning of the street and jogged back, thinking that I would, have enough time before he woke up. So I went in the kitchen when I first got home and to get his bottle and take it in his room. When I went in his room, I noticed that he wasn't breathing. So I didn't know what to do. I just panicked and I grabbed him. A lot of people said, why didn't you start CPR? I didn't know anything about that because that had never happened to me before. And I'm here by myself. I didn't have no phone, no car, no nothing. I just panicked. And I ran outside and I was beating on doors because it was like 11, 12 o'clock at night. And I was beating on this lady door next to me. And she said, she finally came to the door and she told me that she didn't have time. Her kids was in the bed and she didn't have time to take me to the hospital. So that night I had to run. It took me at least 30 minutes to get him to the hospital from where I stayed. I ran downstairs and these people came from the end apartment up under me and they grabbed my son. They took him in their apartment and put him on the floor and started CPR. So I ran still to try to get somebody to, take me to the hospital. So when I ran back in to get him after I got somebody, The lady told me that did the CPR, she said, hold his nose, blow in his mouth, and press in his stomach. She absolutely told me the wrong way. But that's what I did, because I was just trying to get him to breathe. I didn't know what to do. So I did that all the way to the hospital. Well, when I got to the hospital and they took him from me, I was walking around in the waiting room and stuff, and I was scared, first of all. But the first thing coming to my mind as a kid, mostly when you have children and they do something wrong and they know they don't want to get in trouble, what do? They don't tell you the truth. So that's what I did. I was not honest when they started asking me, what happened. I just started making up stuff. And so they told me to go to the police station, which I did. And I continued with not being truthful because I was scared. I didn't. And so then they said, okay, go home. So I went home, and it seemed like the sun couldn't get up fast enough because I couldn't sleep with something like that. They was telling me my son was gone. They couldn't, revive him or anything like that. And I was trying to get back to the hospital to see what they said, what was the cause. But I didn't know that, they had to do an autopsy report to tell what the cause of death was. So when I got there, detectives were there, and they said, well, we need to take you back down for more questioning. And so when I went to the police station, they took me to the police station. Soon as I got in the interrogation room, they jumped up and they started badgering me like they was fixing to jump on me. And this went on for 4 hours. I was in interrogation for 4 hours. And I was scared out of my mind. They kept saying, you beat your baby. You stomped him. This is what you did. You killed that baby. You did this, you did that. And I kept trying to tell them what happened. And they didn't want to hear anything I said. They was trying to tell me to write, the statement out. I was writing it out. He was balling up, throwing it in the trash. So he took a statement in the end and he shoved it in my face and said, now sign this, because this is what you did. So out of fear and out of my last ditch effort for help, I signed the very bottom of the page because I felt like if someone saw that, they would say, well, if she did this, why did she sign right here? Me thinking as a kid, that's what I did. When they read me my rights, I thought that meant you had the right to remain silent meant be quiet until spoken to. I had never had a brush because I didn't, with the law, I didn't understand what they were doing. I didn't have my parents there. I was being interrogated at 17, no parents, no nothing to help me, in this situation. They charged me with capital murder in the course of child abuse. They charged me with the child abuse law that wasn't even a law until 23 days after I was already arrested. I ended up sitting in the county jail for 1 solid year before I even saw my attorney. I saw them 2 days before trial. Never had any type of preparation as to what I was supposed to do, telling me what to expect or anything. All I was told to do was sit and look at the jury. So when I got before the jury, I noticed that the jury was not a jury of my peers. I had 2 blacks on the whole jury. One of the blacks was an alternate. When I saw that, I looked around, nobody looked like me. So I just knew that my life was over. Even though, you know what I'm saying, I didn't understand the law, but just looking at my surroundings, I knew that it was over, and I was right. They came back, when we went to trial, my attorney, my second chair attorney was drunk during the whole trial. He was popping candy in his mouth, talking about we got this thing nipped in the bud. I begged to take the stand in my own defense. They wouldn't do that. They didn't put me on the stand till the second phase. When I went through that, they found me guilty. I was sentenced March the 13th of 1990. My death date was July the 2nd of 1990. When I finally made it to death row, I was 19 years old. And that was one of the worst experiences of my life. I would never wish that on anyone. I'm sitting here trying to explain I didn't commit no crime. I did not kill my son. But none of that was listened to. You know what I'm saying? My attorneys didn't do what they were supposed to. I found out that they only received $1,500 for my whole entire case. That's why I guess they didn't do what they should have done in the very beginning, give me a better representation. The district attorney was able to do all that he could do. He took the jury to a picnic while they were supposed to be sequestered. He talked to all the doctors and nurses in one room. they already knew what they were going to do to me in my first trial. So I didn't stand a chance no matter what happened. So when I got to death row, I was humiliated. I was stripped of everything. They put murder, homicide on my badge. But the most scariest part to me was my death date. Nobody told me that the state had to exhaust all state remedies before they could actually carry out a death sentence. So when July the 2nd came, man, I paced the floors. I listened for every sound, every change, because I actually thought that was the day they was going to kill me, because nobody told me. Going through all of this was the most, there's no words that I could say to describe the fear and terror that I went through upon losing my own son. Death row is not any jail sentence. It's not something that you want to experience. People think jail is, oh man, they feed you, you got lights, you got this and that. It's just not true. I've seen so much in prison. I've seen people get killed. I've seen the K9 unit come down and beat people. I've seen it all. There were days when I was on death row that when it's cold outside, I had to figure out how to stay warm. There were days when it was hot outside, I had to figure out how to stay cool. You have to think, and I mean, if you don't have a strong constitution, there's no way you can make it in prison without cracking up. There's no way. My sentence was overturned in August of '92. Being in prison, I had no human contact, first of all. I had was locked up 23 hours a day, 1 hour yard call. But I didn't want the hour yard call because it was standing out in a bullpen like you do a dog with no shade, no nothing. Who wants that? I kind of just stayed to myself the whole time. But once my sentence was overturned in '92, they put my case in some kind of database, I think it was, and I ended up with an attorney, Rob McDuff and Clive Stafford Smith, who came from England. And they took my case, and in the second trial, they found out my son had heart problems, kidney problems, and chronic bowel syndrome. It was nothing that I had done to cause his death. By him not being able to use the restroom, it poisoned the oxygen supply in his blood. That's what stopped him from breathing in the first place. They knew this, but withheld all of that. They knew. The district attorney, he was new. He wanted to make a name for himself, and he used my case to do it because I didn't have anybody in my corner to fight for me. And that's how my case was overturned. That's how I was found not guilty, because I brought all the evidence that should have been brought in the first trial, in the second trial. I was exonerated December the 18th of 1995. I have been a motivational speaker and advocate for justice since 1996. And so that's why I'm here basically telling my story, because I want guys to understand that if you don't know your rights, and especially if you're a teenager, don't talk to them. Ask for a lawyer right off the bat. Don't give them anything, because once you talk to them, anything you say can and will be held against you in the court of law. So I advocate for young people because that's what happened to me. Now I'm going to yield back to Mr. Rod, because if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, what a powerful story. I'm just so sorry for the pain. But I have lots of questions, right, come up when you share. And the first one's about resiliency and hope. I mean, from losing your son to all of these people who systematically worked against you to steal from your time and to treat you not even like a human, right? How have you been able to maintain hope or belief in a positive worldview?
When I started off, I was angry with God because I couldn't figure out why would he let something so bad happen to me like this. And I kind of went through wrestling with him for some years before I got to the point to say that I got to turn this thing around mentally. So I started writing, I started strengthening my brain and learning what I could to keep myself going so that I could prepare myself for the fight. Because I had to get over the, woe part and say, how am I going to change anything if I don't do something? And I've always learned that a closed mouth never get fed. So I had to do something. And I know that it had to come from within. So I had to start within first in order to maintain and go into it and talk to God about it and forgive in order to be able to fight like I do now.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Also, could you talk to us about, you kind of gave us a timeline of from arrest to conviction to death row to your death date, and then of course in December 18th, 1995 there. So what was it like when you had some lawyers who were beginning to take your case, who you felt like they were really trying to work to your good, and you finally heard that maybe you were going to be released? What was that like?
Boy, I was happy because when my sentence was overturned, when I was on death row, I started screaming and yelling to the top of my lungs because Clive called me and he said, I need you to, are you listening to me? Like that. And I said, yeah, well, what's going on, Clive? Because I didn't know. And he said, well, they overturned your sentence. And I was screaming and he was laughing and it was just a joy but I actually thought that once they overturned your sentence, you get ready to go home, but it didn't work like that. I ended up sitting in the county jail another 3 years before I even went to trial because the district attorney kept putting it off in that county and they kept letting them do it. So it's not just because your sentence overturned that you're going to, you know, um, everything is going to come to an end. It didn't work like that. So when my attorneys showed me that they met me where I was, that's why I got a connection with Clive and them, because they really showed me that, hey, we're trying to fight for you. They sit down, they talk to me, they showed me every aspect of my case, which should have been done in the first trial. It was never done. It was never explained to me. So therefore, I did not know, what I was supposed to expect or see or do or whatever. And that's what made me feel at ease, because I had someone to talk to me and they showed me that they cared.
That human compassion, right? Someone really was listening and cared. I'm just so taken by the fact that you're thinking that you're going to be released and then it's another 3 years down the road. You know, in that period of 3 years, your mind thinks about so much. What was it like when you were finally released? How did your community, your people, how were you received when you got home?
When I first, my sentence was overturned, and you know how you already free and they say you can go. Okay, well, the deputy still put me in the back seat of the car. He was rude. He said, we don't want you here. He said you should leave town soon as you can. That's what he said, because they were very upset. They wanted Forrest Allgood, that's the district attorney, to win this case. They didn't care if I was guilty or not. They didn't care. They just wanted me. I'm Black, and the town, it was racially motivated. And that's sad to say that, but that's the way it was. They didn't want me to win that case. They didn't want me to show the truth. And so that's what he said to me. And I didn't say a word, because here I am in the backseat of this car. I don't know what's fixing to go on. So I just humbled myself. I didn't say anything until we got back to the jail and I was out of his presence. I was able to get my belongings, and my attorneys were there, and I got out of there fast as I could go. And as far as the community was concerned, nobody said anything to me, because you know what I'm saying, I didn't live in a community where people were opposed to me or anything like that. It was just the justice system part of it, those people in that part, but no one else said anything.
Yeah, okay. Gosh, it just seemed one thing after the next of people just not treating with any kind of dignity and respect. So in this time, these years, here you are grieving your son and having this devastating loss. How were you able, after release, to be able to honor and grieve without confinement?
Well, I'm gonna go back and tell you that still was hard, because after my exoneration and all that, people was like, well, you're exonerated, you ought to be free, you ought to be glad, yada yada yada. But it don't work like that. I decided to send for my son's death certificate, to see what it read. When When I got it, it still stated he died, his mother killed. It was homicide. He was beaten and battered and bruised. I had to fight uh, Mississippi once again since I've been up here. And when I found out that was on there, it just broke me. I mean, I cried. I just couldn't believe that these people were still trying to figure out a way to do what they wanted to do to make my life a living hell. So I went and got an attorney. We went back before the courts, and the court said, oh, okay, well, our bad. We're sorry. Here, let's sign it. Here, you can have it. They fixed the death certificate just like that. After all of that, they fixed it. 5 sheets of paper, they fixed the death certificate. So they send it back. Here's the correct part. We're sorry, whatever, like that. Like, you done destroyed my life, and here it is. You get away, you get a pass for what you did. They buried my son in the woods under a tree on a hill. And the bad part about it was I couldn't get him exhumed because he wasn't buried in a metal box thing. He was buried, had to be buried in a box because when they tried to feel for it, they couldn't feel for it. So that was devastating. I can't even get into I couldn't get in to see it. And then I have a daughter. My daughter's 18. She has the same exact disease he had. It's called polycystic kidney disease, and she's fighting for her kidneys now. So the reason that I think that I continue to stay strong is because she needs me, and she can't do this alone, and I got to be here for her. And so I think that's what drives me most, is to try to save my daughter.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing about your son and your daughter's journey. There's so much misunderstanding about those who are incarcerated and in prison and on death row. And I'm sure you've heard so many people say so many things. What should people know about those who are incarcerated, particularly those who are sitting on death row?
One thing about it, everybody on death row is not guilty. Everybody on death row is not guilty. That is my stance. And another thing, I feel like we as a human race should not have the right to say who lives and dies. Now, don't get me wrong about people that actually commit crimes. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be punished. I'm not saying that. Because in jail, when I was there, the charge that I had was the death of a child. I had to fight in the county jail every day to stay alive. There is no picnic in prison. There is no picnic at all. So what I'm saying is, if a person commits a crime, yes, charge them, give them life without the possibility of parole. That way, if you get it wrong, you can fix that. But you can't fix the death penalty once you sentence somebody to that and they didn't do it. What are you gonna do? Go back and say, oh, my bad, I'm sorry, go to the grave. I mean, you can't release somebody from the grave once you make that mistake. And what I feel like is that a lot of these people, I think that attorneys have to do a lot when they're not given the money to do what they need to do, like the district attorney's office is. I don't think that's fair. I think that they need to have a fair playing ground for both sides. That's really the way I think it is, because that was a problem. Death row is not like you think it is. There's a lot of people, yeah, that committed crimes, but everybody in jail is not guilty.
That's a really helpful to kind of push on our assumption that if a person is in jail, therefore they're guilty. And you said there's no picnic in prison. I think that's so helpful. So let's come back to when you're finally released. The last day you're picking your stuff up from the jail and like you're gonna go and get out now in life. Outside of the state saying, okay, you're released, is there any kind of do they try to like compensate, or do they try to like support you, or are you just kind of dropped off? How does that work?
Okay, I got out in 95. I walked around from December 95 to 2009 without a job. Nobody would hire me. Nobody, even though I was exonerated. Nobody wanted, I guess, to
Leto.
start
I'm not the
their
first
business
one. You are, you are. All right.
to their business at all.
This is
And so,
Convocation here. Oh. She was on death row and yeah, I saw that, but I haven't had a minute.
hello, hello, can you hear me? Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you. I can still hear you.
Yeah. Okay, you can still hear me? Okay, all right.
Yes.
I didn't know
So,
if you
so
guys
sorry.
could hear me.
So Sabrina, you were saying that from 1995 to 2009, walking
Yeah,
around with no job, right?
I had no job. And then in 2012, no, 2009, the governor of that town, they passed a law for exonerees to receive compensation for wrongful conviction. And they decided what they thought it was worth. That's how they did that. And by me being walking around, not having no job, no money, I took whatever they gave me, which it shouldn't have been like that, but that's, that's the way they do it. And so they gave me compensation for that. And then they were supposed to erase all my record, for being incarcerated wrongfully and all this type of stuff. And they did that within 14 days. So, but eventually in 2016, I left because I just couldn't, the town was too small. It wasn't helping me. I had to leave that town. But
Wow.
being out, but let me say this though, just because you're exonerated, life don't, it's like you're okay and everything is going to go good for you. That's not true. That's not true. We as exonerees are still struggling to survive. Because first of all, that's like PTSD. You're tortured for something that you didn't do. You have to constantly go through the fear and the stigma of how people will perceive you. Like if you fill out an application, what am I going to say? Oh, okay, well, they asked me where these years go to, where them years came from. Then you have to explain why this is like that. Who you think they're going to accept on their jobs? Who you think they're going to pick you or the guy next to you that don't have all that drama? So that's a big, huge problem for us. Healthcare is another one. And then they don't have programs for exonerees. They have reentry programs for people that actually committed crimes, but not people who are exonerated like me. So where do I fit? You know what I'm saying? Where do we fit? And that's hard for us trying to fit somewhere in this world, and we didn't do anything wrong. And we're still made to suffer. And I don't think that's fair at all. But I think it's like that because United States or any justice system don't want to show you their mistakes. Because when we went to the DOJ, they were like, well, we didn't know this was going on. But how could you not? You're stealing people's lives, innocent people's lives. And then I'm just supposed to pick up the pieces and just keep going.
Yeah, a tragedy of, I mean, that word doesn't even do it justice to what has happened to all the people who have their years robbed and stolen. And like you said, it's a type of PTSD now as you try to pick up the pieces of your life and move forward. And now as you try to, move forward and begin your life again, and as you, move forward and work as an organization, as you're working with other people who've been exonerated, right? You work with Witness to Innocence. What's that been like to be with other people who share that same kind of unspoken trauma?
Well, to me, it's amazing because I meet people like me. I'm actually the first woman in the United States to ever be exonerated. Now it's two of us, Deborah Milkey, and all of us, we get a chance to meet with each other. We do it once a year, and it's, I mean, people have experienced what I have. And so I don't feel like I'm under a microscope. You know what I mean? Because we all going through the same things. We all have the same type of issues. And so to me, that helps me a lot, to be able to do that. And so I enjoy the times that we have together when we do get a chance to see one another.
And as you share your story, have you ever been able or been asked to share your story with families of those who are still on death row or with anybody who is still currently on death row?
Yes, I'm working with Purvis Payne in the Purvis Payne case here in Memphis, Tennessee. I work with his sister now. We're trying to help get him off death row. If you guys want to look up his case, his name is Purvis Payne. And then we also I had a couple of more, but I can't think of their names right now. But I advocate for those too. I mean, and just in general, what I do is like I kind of write some people that are incarcerated, because when you're incarcerated, if you don't have family and friends and that kind of thing to just reach out, send a comforting word, if it is nothing but a card, you know what I'm saying? That helps a lot for people that are incarcerated, because that's a depressing place. So I try to advocate and try to talk, and I will do that, reach out to people. It doesn't hurt, because you're still human at the end of the day. A lot of people, some folks made mistakes, but they're trying to atone for their mistakes. But how long does a person have to pay for any mistake they might have made? That's the question. How long, even if you are guilty, how long must that person, I just I don't know what, I don't know if you have a time limit on it. I don't know what it is. I just think that we're so quick to judge one another, and we just make you pay for the rest of your life, no matter what it is, innocent or not.
And you ask a really important question about the idea of how long do we have to pay, and perpetual kind of atoning for our mistakes. And obviously you have all this time to think and process and go through in your mind, especially in solitary confinement. And during those years, anything that you learned about yourself, and that outside of the fact that you're very resilient and have a strong constitution, is there anything else that you learned about yourself in that process?
Well, when I went in, I was a child, and being in prison, you grow up really fast. If anybody remembers the show MacGyver, you have to learn how to survive. So I did learn how to survive. And I was able to get hold to any educational thing that possible to try to feed my mind. So I learned how to grow up, for one, really, really quick. And that's about and watch my back. And you come out of there with trust issues. I have a serious problem with trust issues. It took me 10 years to even just try to realize that I was free. I used to go through my house every day, checking the dog, checking everybody, just to make sure that they were breathing on my watch. That's why I know that we should be part of the torture act of something. They should make that a law where people who are exonerated should be a part of that act. That's what we were trying to do, with the DOJ, to get us a part of that act. Because I think that we should be. I think we should advocate and push for that for exonerees, because it's a lot of us, messed up from this, really messed up. A lot of them are self-medicating. Some of them have killed themselves, all kind of stuff, because they can't cope. They can't cope for what has happened. I mean, that's really hard. I'm telling you, this is really, really, your mental health, we need that. We really do.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that to our attention, the idea of mental support, and that's just so powerful, the idea of 10 years to realize that you were free. And I hate to throw this word around, but I know it comes up in conversations, issues of forgiveness, right? As you think about those who have systematically worked against you and robbed you of your time and the grief of your son, what is that a process you're working on, or how does that work in your life with forgiveness and those who have done you wrong?
You know what? I got to the place in my life to say, I don't think I would be where I am now if I didn't forget. I really don't. You know what I'm saying? I got to the point to say that, hey, these people I'm mad at, they don't really know and probably don't care that I'm mad at them. I was killing myself inside. So I had to change that in order to be able to survive. Because if I didn't do that, I wouldn't be here today. I probably already been dead somewhere, or in worse, or in trouble for real. You know what I mean? Because some people hold on to that type of hate, and it just tears you up inside. And I'm not that type of person. I've never had that type of heart. People have mistreated me, and I can go right back to that person and talk to them. And I'm glad God made me like that, because I just can't, I don't like stress. I live in bliss. If I can't, then I can't be around you. You know what I'm saying? I like peace. I love my peace. I love going outside. I like the trees, smelling the air. I just like stuff that I took for granted back then. You know what I'm saying? And that's the way I live my life. I keep my kids, we try to talk about positive things. I'm on a positive journey, and that's the way I live my life. And that's why I guess I'm still goofy and smile and keep you laughing or whatever, because I like that better. And I don't drink and I don't smoke, but I like being goofy.
But that's one positive way to move forward. I have one other question. I know we've been taking some people in the chat box, but this would be a good space if anyone else has a question to either unmute and jump in or put it in the chat. But my last question is about this. When you go through that year at the county jail, you're waiting on trial, and then it comes down and they give this conviction, and your support people. I know sometimes people talk about they're surprised who stayed with them and who abandoned them. Can you talk about that journey of who stayed with you or who didn't stay with you in all those years of wrongful conviction?
What I did, I along my journey, I found 2 people used to come to the county jail all the time and sing to us, and they stayed with me on my journey. You know what I mean? They helped me through the whole thing. They used to send me boxes and everything in prison because my mom was poor. She couldn't afford to send me anything. Me and my mama's relationship changed, and we established a good relationship. My mom became my advocate. She fought for me. She fought until the day she passed. She had cancer, so she fought. And so with her resilience that I saw in her, I think that's what drove me to fight, because I wanted to see my family and I wanted out. And my oldest son, was being raised by someone else. And I had to get my son back. So when I got out, he was 9 years old, and it still took me 4 years to get him back. So, it was a journey, but sometimes you just have to do what you got to do. And that's what I did.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. 4 years to get your son back. It just when you start sharing, I'm just so taken by the layers of loss. It's not just one thing. It's so many. Yes, so many losses. Well, you are an absolute inspiration, Sabrina, for your you said goofiness and your kind of positivity and and really trying to be a change agent from Washington State to New Hampshire to even today in Kentucky. Would encourage anyone who's on the call. The bill about the death penalty has been on a couple times. We have a couple legislators who are really pushing hard. There's a group in Louisville that's fighting really hard to try to see Kentucky to not be a death row state. If this speaks to you, I would encourage you to reach out to local legislators, tell them this is an important priority. If they hear from you, they might get a little bit motivated to do something about it. So, Sabrina, again, thank you so much for your time, your message. And hey, the new phone worked out. It held up.
It
So
did work out, didn't it? But I want to say this. If you guys will follow me, just keep up with me. I'm on Facebook under Sabrina Smith. You guys just, check me out, because right now I'm writing my book, the second part of it, and it will be out soon. So it'll tell my whole story. So if you look under sabrinabutler.webs.com, you will I will post whenever it's ready, and then I will send a Facebook blast out and let everybody know once it hits. So if you guys would, just up and lift me, I sure appreciate it.
Well,